Story 1. I was about 14 when this happened. It was summer and my best friend Lexi lived next door. Our parents were close, rode motorcycles together, and would take weekend trips, leaving us at one of our houses. It wasn't anything new. We were used to it. That night we were at her place, just hanging out, talking about whatever 14-year-old girls talk about. The house felt normal, nothing weird. It was just us and the occasional sound of the cicadas outside. Then we heard it, a motorcycle pulling up. We looked at each other. Our parents weren't supposed to be back until morning, but we both knew the sound. Gravel crunching under tires, the deep rumble of an engine. Then another one. 2 motorcycles. We jumped up and ran to the window. Bright headlights flooded the driveway, bouncing off the trees. It had to be them. Maybe they forgot something. But before we could even take a step out of the room, we heard knocking at the front door. And then a voice. "Hello." It was soft. A woman's voice, but not one we recognized. We froze. That wasn't our moms. That wasn't anyone we knew. And then the front door opened. Lexi's house had this old wooden floor, and the front door always scraped when it was pushed open. We heard it. Clear as day, that long, slow scrape against the floor. I grabbed Lexi's arm. "Who the hell is that?" Her face had gone pale. We crept down the hall, moving slow. We didn't have any weapons, nothing to defend ourselves with. The living room was dark, but the front door was wide open. The screen door was shut, but we could see straight outside. Nothing. No motorcycles. No people. Just the empty driveway, bathed in the glow of the porch light. The gravel was still. The air was heavy and quiet, like everything was holding its breath. Lexi whispered, "Where did they go?" I had no answer. The bikes were there. We heard them. The knocking. The voice. But now, nothing. We stood there, not moving. I strained to listen, trying to hear footsteps, rustling, anything. But it was silent. Then out of nowhere, Lexi gasped and clutched my wrist. "What?" I hissed. She was staring at the hallway. Her parents' bedroom door was open, just a crack. "I saw something," she whispered, "in their room." My stomach dropped. "Who?" She shook her head, eyes wide. "Not who. What?" A chill ran up my spine. The room was dark, the door barely open. But something was in there. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. That awful electric feeling of being watched. My breathing got shallow. Lexi's hand was ice cold in mine. Then the door creaked, just an inch. But we both saw it move. I wanted to run. Every instinct was screaming at me to run, but my legs wouldn't work. Lexi took a step back, and that tiny movement must have triggered something. Because the door swung open, I saw it. A figure, tall, almost touching the top of the door frame. Too tall to be a person. The shape was just darkness, no features, no eyes. But I knew it was looking at us. I could feel its attention, like a weight pressing down on my chest. Lexi let out a choked sob and dropped to the floor. I didn't even think. I grabbed her under the arms and yanked her back toward her room. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely keep hold of her. We slammed the door shut and locked it. But it didn't matter, because the moment we turned around, the closet door clicked open. I don't remember screaming, but I must have. Lexi was sobbing. We didn't move, didn't breathe. The closet door swung outward inch by inch, and inside, nothing. Just Lexi's clothes, some shoes, an old backpack. But I swear to God, the air was different. Heavy, wrong, like something had just been standing there and stepped back out of sight the second we looked. We didn't sleep that night. We didn't even leave the room. We sat on her bed, backs against the wall, watching the door, waiting for something else to happen. But it didn't. In the morning, we checked the front door. It was locked, like it had never been open. Her parents came home, and we didn't tell them. What would we even say? That something pretended to be them? That something walked through their house in the middle of the night? They'd never believe us. We never talked about it after that. Not really, but neither of us ever stayed alone in that house again. Story 2. When my husband and I first moved into our townhouse apartment, I thought we were getting a good deal. The place was decent, even if the landlord, an older woman named Carol, was an absolute nightmare. She didn't like us. She made it clear. Said we had lied about me being pregnant when we signed the lease. Complained about my husband's race under her breath, thinking I didn't hear her, and she never fixed anything. The place had no heat, the ceiling fan sparked when it was on, and the garbage disposal was literally held on with duct tape. It was a mess, but rent was cheap and we didn't have a choice. By the time our baby was 9 months old, I had given up arguing with her about the heat. We had space heaters in every room just to keep the place livable. It was winter, cold enough that I could see my breath some mornings. That day, I had just fed the baby lunch, and it was one of those messy feedings where more food ends up on them than in them. So I took them upstairs for a bath. The bathroom was small, no windows, just a vent that didn't do much. I ran the tub, set up the little suction cup bath seat, and put one of our space heaters on the counter to keep the room warm. I was standing in the tub, getting ready to lift the baby out, when I noticed the heater. It rocked, just a little. I stared at it. It had been perfectly still. There was no reason for it to move. The counter wasn't uneven, I hadn't touched it, but it moved again, harder this time, like someone had bumped it. My stomach dropped. Something wasn't right, and then, all at once, it tipped. I didn't have time to think. The heater was falling, and the cord wasn't long enough to reach the floor. It was going to land in the tub. With my baby, I lunged, grabbed the baby seat, and yanked it up so hard the suction cups popped loose. I barely had time to throw the baby out of the tub onto the floor, and then the heater hit the shower door, bounced, landed sideways on the tile. It shut off automatically, but it had missed the water by inches. My heart was pounding. I turned, still clutching the baby seat, and that's when I saw the corner of the bathroom. It got darker, not like a light going out, not like a shadow moving. It was like the air itself thickened, swallowing the light. My skin prickled, my chest tightened. I felt something watching me, and then I smelled it. Cigarette smoke, thick, heavy. The kind that sticks to walls, to fabric, to the back of your throat. Camel non-filters. The brand Carol smoked. I knew that smell. It was so strong that my lungs seized. I coughed, my eyes watering, but there was no smoke, no haze, just the smell and the feeling, hatred, pure, focused hatred. Something was in that corner, staring at me, wishing me dead. I could feel it. It pressed against my skin, a weight, a pressure, like hands ready to shove me down, to hold me under, to push my face into the water and keep it there. I snatched up the baby, wrapped them in a towel, and ran. I didn't stop until I was downstairs. I didn't even grab clothes. I just held my baby, heart hammering, my skin cold with sweat. I stayed there shaking until my husband came home. I never told him the full story, not really, just that the heater almost fell into the tub, that it scared me. I didn't know how to explain the rest. How do you say, I think Carol's hatred turned into something real? How do you explain the way that darkness felt? The way the air itself seemed to turn against you? That night when my husband went to check the heater, the smell was gone. The air was normal, but I never bathed the baby upstairs again. A few months later, we moved out. Carol died not long after that. I don't know what happened in that bathroom. Story 3. I was working an event at this old theater downtown, one of those buildings that had been around forever, where people loved to say it was haunted. I'd heard the stories, sure, but I didn't put much stock in that kind of thing. I like ghost stories as much as the next person, but I didn't believe in them, at least not in the way that people always seem to. That night, I was running around like crazy. We were setting up for a big corporate event, and I had a million things to do. My mind was locked in on logistics, who needed what equipment had to go where, whether the sound guys were ready, that sort of thing. The last thing I was thinking about was ghosts. I was heading toward one of the upstairs rooms, a small reception space off the mezzanine. It was quiet up there, away from the main floor where people were moving tables and setting up lighting. The mezzanine wrapped around the open theater space below, a good 25-foot drop down to the main level. It had one of those old iron railings, solid but ornate, probably as old as the building itself. I was walking fast, thinking about where I needed to be next, when I stopped at the railing for just a second, checking something on my phone. And that's when I felt it. A hand, something, grabbed my ankle. Not a brush, not a shift in my balance, not a muscle spasm. A grip, firm, fingers wrapping around just above my shoe, tightening like someone was reaching up from below. I reacted instantly, violently. I jerked my leg up so hard I nearly lost my balance. I stumbled backward, slamming into the wall behind me, shaking my leg like I could get something off of it. My breath went short and fast, my brain refusing to process what had just happened. There was nothing there. I looked down. The floor was solid beneath me. No gaps, no open spaces. And below that, just air. Empty space all the way down to the main floor. I looked over the railing. No one. No possible way someone had grabbed me from there. I turned back, scanning the mezzanine. It was empty. Just me and the dim lighting, the quiet hum of the building around me. I rubbed my ankle. I could still feel the sensation of fingers. Not just pressure, but the distinct feeling of being held. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining it. Something had touched me. My body was reacting before my brain could fully process it. My heart was hammering. I was sweating. Every hair on my body was standing up. I told myself I needed to move. I needed to finish what I was doing, get back downstairs, keep going. But I couldn't. My legs wouldn't work right. I just stood there staring at the floor, then at the railing, then back at my own foot, waiting for some kind of explanation to drop into my head. But nothing made sense. I backed away from the spot, still shaking, still feeling the lingering touch on my skin. I wanted to get away from that mezzanine. I wanted to be around people, but part of me didn't want to turn my back. I couldn't shake the feeling that if I did, something would be behind me. I forced myself to move, to walk, slowly at first, then faster, then practically running down the stairs to the main floor. I must have looked insane. My coworker Daniel caught my arm as I came down. "Hey, you good?" I opened my mouth to say something. I didn't know what, but all I could manage was, "I need to step outside for a second." I didn't stop moving until I was out on the street, breathing in the cold night air, hands on my knees, trying to pull myself together. I never told anyone exactly what happened that night. Every time I thought about saying it out loud, I felt stupid. What would I even say? That something impossible happened? That something touched me where nothing should have been? I finished the event. I worked in that theater a few more times after that, but I never went back to the mezzanine alone, and I never ever stood by that railing again. Story 4, I was taking a meeting with a collaborator at a co-working space in the city. It was broad daylight, somewhere around 2 p.m. The space was modern with big windows letting in sunlight, a mix of sleek furniture and those little aesthetic touches that make a place feel inviting. We sat on a long, plush couch in the middle of the room, talking about a potential series of events we could organize together. It was a business meeting, nothing personal, so I made sure to leave a cushion of space between us. Just normal social distance. We were mid-conversation, throwing ideas back and forth, when I felt it. The shift, the unmistakable sensation of movement, like someone walking up to us and sitting down. I didn't see anyone, but I felt them, and immediately I could tell. So did he. We both stopped talking at the exact same moment. It wasn't gradual. 1 second, words were flowing, and the next, silence. We just stared at the empty cushion between us. Except, it wasn't empty. The cushion had sunk, like real, actual weight had pressed into it. I saw it happen. The dip in the fabric, the way the material stretched slightly, the way the whole couch shifted just the tiniest bit, the way it would if an actual person had just sat down between us. My heart started hammering in my chest. I wanted to rationalize it. Maybe I had shifted and caused the cushion to move. But no, I hadn't moved at all. And it wasn't just me who saw it. My collaborator was staring, wide-eyed, his mouth slightly open, like he wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. We sat like that, frozen, for at least 30 seconds. And when I say 30 seconds, I mean I counted in my head. That's a long time to be silent in the middle of a business conversation. A long, unnatural, suffocating silence. The air had changed too. It was heavier, denser, the kind of weight you feel in your chest when something is just wrong. I swallowed hard and forced a nervous chuckle. "Did you see that?" My voice sounded weirdly thin, not like my own. He nodded slowly, barely breathing. "Yeah, I saw it." The cushion was still indented, still pressed down like someone was sitting there, but no one was there. I don't know what came over me, but I waved my hand through the space, half expecting to feel something solid. Nothing, just air. But the impression on the cushion didn't lift. That's when the fear really set in. I pulled my hand back and clenched my fists, trying to steady my breathing. My collaborator let out a shaky breath and muttered, "Let's wrap this up." I nodded fast. Neither of us wanted to stay. We ended the meeting within seconds, barely saying anything else, and grabbed our stuff. As we stood up, I looked back at the couch. The cushion was still pressed down. But then, right in front of my eyes, it slowly lifted, like someone was getting up. The fabric smoothed back into place. The couch bounced slightly as if releasing weight. And then, nothing. I don't even remember leaving the building. 1 second I was staring at that couch, and the next I was outside, my collaborator next to me, both of us breathing hard like we'd just sprinted. We never talked about it again. We didn't even finish that project together. The whole thing just died. Story 5. I manage a venue that used to be a Roman Catholic church, then sat abandoned for years before becoming a flophouse. Now it's a music hall, a club, an event space, whatever people need it to be. During the day it's loud, full of people, but late at night, when I'm the last one in the building, it's different. The air feels thick, like the walls are holding their breath, waiting for me to leave. I've never been the kind of person who believes in ghosts. I grew up hearing stories, sure, everyone has, but I always chalk them up to overactive imaginations, tricks of the mind, the way an empty space can make you feel watched when there's nobody there. But something happened to me in that building that I can't explain, and I swear to this day that I wasn't asleep when it happened. It was a Sunday morning, and I was hungover as hell. I had to be there early to let in a group rehearsing for some performance. I don't even remember what it was for. Maybe a play, maybe some weird experimental art piece. I wasn't in the mood to care. I unlocked the doors, waved them in, mumbled something about locking up when they were done, and went upstairs to the old lounge area. The lounge is tucked away, up a narrow set of stairs leading to what used to be the priest's quarters. There's a couch up there, not the cleanest, but comfortable enough. I just needed to sleep off my headache, let time pass until my shift was over. So I lay down, pulled my hoodie over my face, and dozed off. I don't know how long I slept, but I woke up suddenly. You know that feeling when your body just knows something's wrong? My eyes were still closed, but I was fully awake, listening. The building was silent except for the muffled sound of the rehearsal group downstairs. Then I heard it. Slow, deliberate footsteps coming down the stairs from the bell tower. I held my breath. I knew without a doubt that nobody should be up there. The door to the tower stays locked. I was the only one with a key, but the steps kept coming, one by one, heavy, like someone taking their time. I kept my eyes shut, still half convinced I was dreaming, or hoping if I ignored it, it would go away. But then I heard something else. A man muttering under his breath. Low, unintelligible words, just above a whisper. I couldn't make out what he was saying, but I could feel it. He was close. I wanted to move, to sit up, to open my eyes, but I was frozen. My pulse was hammering in my ears. The footsteps stopped right next to the couch. The muttering stopped. And then, a hand. A firm, ice-cold grip on my hip, fingers pressing hard enough to hurt. I jolted, gasping, eyes flying open. There was no one there, but I felt it. I swear to God, I felt it. My skin was tingling where the hand had been, the pressure still lingering. I scrambled off the couch, backing against the wall, scanning the room. Empty, silent. I stayed there for a long time, my breath coming fast, my body shaking. Eventually, I forced myself to go downstairs. The rehearsal group was still there, completely oblivious to what had just happened. I didn't say a word to them. I just waited for them to leave, locked up, and got the hell out of there. I've tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was sleep paralysis, but I've never had that before or since. Maybe I was dreaming, but I know what I felt. Whatever was in that room with me, it was real. Story 6. I work night shifts at a psychiatric facility. It's not one of those old Gothic asylums you see in movies, just a regular modern building. But let me tell you, when it's past midnight and you're alone in a quiet hallway, it doesn't matter how new the walls are. The place is still full of shadows. I was on my usual round that night, walking the halls, checking doors, listening for anything unusual. Most patients were sedated or asleep. The nurses were at their station, some watching monitors, others doing paperwork. Everything was normal. Then at around 2:30 a.m., I passed by the chapel. The chapel was small, barely more than a room with a few wooden pews, a simple cross, and a confessional booth tucked in the corner. It was mostly empty at night. No one really used it. But as I walked past, I heard something that made me stop. Whispering. It was low, almost like chanting. A steady murmur, just barely audible through the heavy door. I thought maybe one of the patients had wandered in. Wouldn't be the first time. Some of them like to sit in there, talk to themselves, pray, or just escape the walls of their rooms for a bit. But we always locked the chapel at night. No one should have been in there. I reached for my keys, unlocked the door, and pushed it open. Darkness. The only light was the dim red glow of the exit sign by the door. The whispering had stopped. I stepped inside, my flashlight cutting through the room. The pews were empty. The air smelled like old wood and dust. Then I heard it again. A whisper coming from the confessional. I turned my flashlight toward it. The booth was just a small wooden structure, a seat on one side, a screened window dividing it. The priest's side was empty. The door to the other side was shut. Someone was in there. "Hello," I called. "You're not supposed to be in here." No response. I stepped closer, my boots echoing on the tile. My hand hovered over the door handle. Something about this felt wrong. I've had patients lash out before. I've had them scream, try to bite, try to claw. But this wasn't that. This was quiet. Too quiet. I knocked. "You okay in there?" A breath, slow, deep. Then a whisper, so soft I almost didn't catch it. "Help me." I didn't think. I just opened the door, and there was no one inside. The seat was empty. The space was small, too small for someone to have slipped past me. But the smell, it hit me all at once. Something rotten, thick in the air, like meat left out in the sun. My stomach turned. Then from behind me, a scraping sound. Slow, deliberate, like nails dragging across wood. I spun around, my flashlight beam shaking. The pews, the cross, empty space, nothing. Then the whisper came again, right against my ear. "Help me!" I bolted. I didn't stop until I was back at the nurse's station, breathing hard. I must have looked pale because one of the nurses frowned. "You okay?" I nodded, swallowing the nausea rising in my throat. Did anyone go into the chapel tonight?" She shook her head. "No one's been in there for weeks." I didn't go back to check. I finished my shift, went home, and tried to forget it. But here's the thing. The next night, when I came back to work, I passed by the chapel again. The door was open, and inside on the confessional seat where no one had been the night before, there was a single, deep scratch in the wood, like something had clawed its way out. Story 7. Back when I was younger, I worked as a janitor at a high school. It was one of those jobs you take because you need the money, not because you want to. Nights were long, quiet, and boring, but at least I didn't have to deal with kids making a mess in real time. The school itself was old, built sometime in the 50s. You could tell by the way the floors creaked and the walls seemed to hold onto sounds longer than they should. The air always had that mix of dust, bleach, and something stale, like old books and damp clothes. I worked the night shift alone. My routine was simple: sweep the hallways, mop the floors, clean the bathrooms, take out the trash. Nothing complicated, but it was a big school, so it took time. The worst part was the bathrooms. They always felt off, especially the one at the far end of the second floor. It was the oldest part of the school, where the tiles were cracked, the stalls had old graffiti scratched into them, and the mirrors were dull and slightly warped. I hated cleaning that one. but I saved it for last so I could get it over with and go home right after. That night, I was in the middle of mopping when I heard it. Laughter. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to stop me in my tracks. A soft, giggling sound, high-pitched, like a kid trying not to be heard. It echoed off the tiled walls, making it impossible to tell where it was coming from. My first thought was that some student had snuck in, maybe some dumb prank. "Hey," I called out. "School's closed. If you're in here, you need to leave." Silence. I waited, my heart already beating a little too fast. No footsteps, no scuffling, just the steady hum of the fluorescent lights. I shook my head, went back to mopping. Maybe I imagined it. Then the stall door creaked. One of the stalls at the end. I stared at it, gripping the mop handle tighter. It had been opened before. I was sure of it. I always checked. "Look, I don't have time for this," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "If someone's in there, you need to come out." No response. I stepped closer. The door was slightly ajar, just enough for darkness to peek through. My fingers twitched. I told myself to just push it open, get it over with. But I hesitated. Then, another giggle. Right next to my ear. I spun so fast I nearly slipped. Nothing. The stall door was still slightly open, unmoving. The air around me felt thick, heavy. My chest tightened. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but my brain kept trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was the old pipes. Maybe it was some weird echo. Maybe I was just tired. I forced myself to move. I reached out, fingers brushing against the cold metal of the stall door, and then it slammed shut. Hard, so hard the walls shook. That was it. I dropped the mop and bolted. I ran down the hallway, my footsteps slamming against the floor, breath ragged. I didn't stop until I was outside, shoving the door open and gulping in the cold night air. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely pull my keys out of my pocket. I got in my car and drove off without looking back. I didn't go back for my stuff, didn't clock out, didn't care. The next morning I called and quit. Never went back, never worked as a janitor again. I don't know what I heard that night. I don't want to know. But I'll tell you this, whatever it wasn't a prank, and it sure as hell wasn't my imagination. Story 8, I was 20 when I visited Italy with my girlfriend. We were in a small medieval town, the kind with narrow stone streets and buildings that looked like they hadn't changed in centuries. There was an old tower there, one you could climb. I wanted to go up, but she wasn't interested, so I went alone. It was a hot day, bright sun, not a cloud in the sky. The entrance to the tower was shaded and cool, the stone walls thick enough to block the heat. A single staircase wound its way up the inside, hugging the wall in a tight spiral. There were no windows, just the dim glow of electric lights set into the ceiling at long intervals. I started climbing. It wasn't a long climb, maybe 4 or 5 minutes at most, but the air inside felt heavy, like the tower was swallowing sound. My footsteps echoed, no one else was there. At the top, there was a metal ladder bolted into the stone, leading up to a wooden trapdoor. I climbed it, unlatched the door, and pushed it open. The second I stuck my head out, I froze. The weather had changed, completely. Gone was the bright, cloudless sky. Now everything was dark. The air felt thick, charged, electric. Heavy gray clouds swirled overhead, low and fast-moving. I swear I could feel the pressure in my ears. I climbed onto the roof, but only barely. The space was small, just a flat stone platform surrounded by a metal safety cage. The bars ran around the edge, curving slightly inward at the top. I turned my head toward the horizon. Lightning flickered in the distance, then closer, and then I saw something impossible. A bolt of electricity, thin, bright, like a static charge, jumped between two of the metal bars. Not a full lightning strike, but an arc, stretching in a sharp, crackling line. I stared, my brain scrambling to make sense of it. Another arc, this one longer, then another. The bars themselves seemed to hum, vibrating with energy. The realization hit me like a gut punch. I was standing on top of a medieval tower in an active electrical storm. I was going to be struck. I turned and dropped through the trap door without thinking, climbed down the ladder fast, too fast, nearly missing a step. The metal was hot under my hands. I stumbled as I hit the stone floor, then ran down the stairs two at a time, gripping the inner wall to keep from tripping. My heart was hammering. I reached the bottom, breathless, expecting, what? Rain? Wind? The town in chaos from a sudden storm? Instead, I stepped out into bright sunlight. The sky was clear, completely, totally clear. I stood there panting, my body still braced for disaster. My girlfriend looked at me, frowning. "Are you okay?" I turned and looked up at the tower. The top was still there, still stone, still caged in metal. No signs of lightning, no storm, no explanation. I don't know how long I stood there. I told her what I'd seen. The storm, the lightning, the way the bars sparked like something out of a horror movie. She laughed at first, then she saw my face. "It didn't storm," she said. "The weather hasn't changed at all." I argued I had seen it. I had felt it, but no one else had. I checked the sky again, hoping, what? That I'd see some proof, some lingering dark clouds. But there was nothing. Just blue sky, warm sun, the same day I'd walked into before climbing the tower. I've never been able to explain it, and I've never gone back. Story 9. I used to work overnight shifts at a grocery store. It wasn't bad, boring mostly. Just a handful of us stocking shelves, running freight, and killing time until morning. The store was quiet at night, aisles empty except for the occasional late-night straggler. You get used to the hum of the refrigeration units, the beeping of the scanners, the way your footsteps sound too loud on the tile. One night, though, I heard something I couldn't explain. It was around 2:30 a.m., and I was in the back storage area, organizing frozen stock before bringing it out. The freezer was a massive industrial walk-in, its heavy metal door lined with thick rubber seals to keep the cold in. It was the kind you had to shove your shoulder into just to open. I was the only one back there. The rest of the crew was out front, working on the shelves. I was halfway through stacking a box of frozen pizzas when I heard it. A knock, a slow, deliberate knock from inside the freezer. I stopped, listened. Nothing. It was probably just shifting stock, I told myself. Sometimes if things weren't stacked right, a box would tip over. That was all. I went back to work. A minute later, knock, knock. Louder this time. I turned toward the freezer door. The sound had definitely come from inside. I stared at it, waiting, listening to the deep mechanical hum of the compressors. Then, bang! It was sharp, urgent, like a fist slamming against metal. I dropped the pizzas and took a step back. The freezer door didn't have a lock, just a heavy latch that could be opened from the inside. No one could get stuck in there. But I knew without a doubt that no one had gone in. I wasn't about to open it. Instead, I turned and walked fast out of the stockroom and straight to the front of the store, where my co-worker James was breaking down boxes. "Hey man," I said, keeping my voice even. "Anyone go in the freezer?" James looked up, puzzled. "Nope. Why?" I hesitated. "I heard something." "What kind of something?" I hesitated again, then just said it. "Knocking." James frowned. "Inside?" "Yeah." For a second, he didn't say anything. Then, without a word, he set down his box cutter and started walking toward the back. I followed, feeling both relieved and uneasy. If something was actually going on, at least I wasn't checking it out alone. We got to the freezer. The dropped pizzas were still on the floor where I'd left them. The door was closed. James grabbed the handle. "Dude, wait!" But he pulled it open before I could stop him. The freezer was a deep, foggy cold. Rows of metal shelves stacked high with frozen goods. Nothing unusual. "Hello?" James called out. His voice echoed off the icy walls. Nothing. I stepped inside with him, rubbing my arms against the sudden chill. We checked behind the shelves, even looked up at the ventilation grates. Nothing. No one. "You sure you heard knocking?" James asked, glancing at me. I nodded. "Twice, then a bang." He gave me a look but didn't argue. "Let's just finish up and get out of here." We were halfway to the door when we heard it, the latch. It clicked. Then, the door slammed shut. The lights flickered. A burst of panic shot through me as I lunged for the handle. James did too, yanking hard, but the door wouldn't budge. It wasn't locked. It just wouldn't move. "Hey, open the door!" James yelled, pounding on it. No response. I reached for my radio. "Darren, we're stuck in the freezer. Come open the door." Static. No reply. James kept banging, shouting for help. My breath fogged in the air. The temperature was dropping fast and the cold was already biting into my fingers. Then from behind us, footsteps. Not shuffling, not stock shifting. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. We spun around. There was nothing there. The aisle between the shelves was empty, but the sound didn't stop. Step, step, step. It was getting closer. I backed up against the door, my breath coming faster. "James!" "I hear it," he muttered. He was pale. We stood there frozen as the footsteps passed right in front of us. No one was there, but something was. The lights flickered again. The air felt heavier, pressing in on us, then whispering. Right next to my ear. I felt the breath on my skin. I bolted. James was right behind me. We hit the door hard, shoving it with everything we had, and suddenly it opened. We stumbled out, gasping, slamming the door behind us. Darren was standing a few feet away, looking at us like we were crazy. "What the hell are you two doing?" We just stared at him. "We were stuck," James finally managed. "The door wouldn't open." Darren frowned. "I just walked back here and saw it standing wide open." James and I looked at each other. We hadn't imagined that. I didn't go near the freezer again after that. James switched to days 2 weeks later. I don't know what was in there with us. I don't want to know. But something was. Story 10. I used to work at a supermarket in my hometown, a small farm town where nothing much happened. The only real grocery store was Robertson's, a family-owned place that had been around for decades. Everyone had an opinion on the Robertsons. Some called them shrewd businessmen. Others said they were downright evil. Me? I just thought the place had a bad feeling, like something was off. A lot of it came from Blaine Robertson, the family patriarch. The man had to be pushing 90, but he still lurked around the store like he owned the place, which technically he did. His son ran the business now, but Blaine refused to let go. He'd shuffle up and down the aisles, watching us, always finding something to yell about. Clocking in a minute early, stealing from me, standing around near the clock, you're lazy, walking too slow, move like you got a job to do. It was like he had a sixth sense for catching bag boys slacking, and I swear the man never blinked. I worked mostly nights, closing shifts, stocking shelves, cleaning up, taking out the trash. One night, it was just me and another bagger, a guy named Mark, finishing up our shift. The store closed at 10, and by 9:30 it was empty except for us and Blaine. He'd come in earlier, shuffling up the stairs to his office like usual. We hung around the back, waiting for the clock to hit 10 so we could lock up. The break room was right at the base of the stairs leading up to the office, and since Blaine never left without making some kind of noise, coughing, shuffling, muttering to himself, we figured he was still up there. At 10 sharp, I said, "I'll go tell him we're locking up." Mark nodded, leaning against the wall. "Good luck with that." I climbed the stairs, and about halfway up, I realized something was wrong. It was dark. Blaine never left his office without turning on every damn light, but now everything was pitch black. I reached the top and hesitated. "Mr. Robertson?" Silence. The air was heavy, thick. My pulse picked up. The office door was open, but there was no movement, no rustling of papers, no sound at all. Just the faint hum of the store's refrigeration units downstairs. I stepped inside and flipped the light switch. Nothing. The power wasn't out. The lights in the store were still on. The office just wasn't. I backed up toward the stairs. "Mark!" A thump behind me. I spun. The darkness in the office felt deeper, like something was in it. Footsteps, slow, dragging. But they weren't coming from the office. They were coming from above it. I looked up. The ceiling of the office was part of the old storage area, just a flat stretch of wood. No attic, no crawl space, but something was moving up there. Thump, drag, thump, drag. It stopped right above me, I bolted. I nearly fell down the stairs, hitting the bottom step so hard I stumbled into Mark. "What the hell, dude?" he said, grabbing my arm. I grabbed him back. "Where's Blaine?" He frowned. "What? Where the hell is Blaine?" Mark gestured at the empty stockroom. "He never came down." I felt sick. We stood right here the whole time. The only way down was the stairs or the fire escape outside the office. We would have seen him leave. I swallowed hard. "We're leaving." We locked up fast. Neither of us said a word until we were in the parking lot. "Dude," Mark muttered, staring up at the dark office windows. "Where did he go?" I didn't answer. The next day, Blaine was back, shuffling through the aisles like nothing had happened. I asked one of the cashiers when he had left the night before. She gave me a weird look. "He didn't come in last night." I quit 2 weeks later. Thanks for watching. Don't leave before leaving a like to this video. Also hit the subscribe button to support my work. And as always, have a horrific nightmare, my dear.